All right. This is BS with Joe. Joe?
Yep.
And I'm Brad Scott. So, what are we talking about today? We're talking about
The Tariff Wars.
Tariff Wars. So, I listed it as Tariff World Wars in my little notes. And the reason why I listed it is because, we did this tariff banter back and forth with Canada.
Yeah.
So has China with Canada.
Yeah.
They increased their tariffs on Canada.
Right.
Um,
China, actually, when Trump started the tariff thing, China jumped on board.
Oh yeah,
They're doing it all across the board.
right. And we even tariffed them 10%.
Right. Yeah, it was originally going to be 25, but he dropped it to 10.
Right, because they were like, okay.
Yeah. But they tariffed us too.
Right. And the U.S. has been tariffed like crazy.
Well, let's talk about tariffs.
Right.
Just tariffs.
So people understand what tariffs
Yeah.
are.
Tariffs have been around since the first two governments existed.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, if you want to sell your goods in my country, you have to pay the country
A tax. Or
So,
a tariff.
We grow wheat, you grow wheat. I've got this much wheat for my country, and I don't really need yours, so we'll just charge you more for you to sell it here.
Mm-hmm.
But you do have stuff that we need, and we'll still charge you tax for that. But it's this is how it works, because income tax didn't really exist back then.
Nope.
All the countries lived off of tariffs.
Right. Except for monarchies. Monarchies tax the people.
But then again, the tax that they got from the people didn't really make enough to support the government.
Right. It was mostly different countries.
Yeah, it's just like the Gen Fare box and the buses. We get 7% of our income comes from that.
Yeah. So, so that we explained to you what tariffs are. So, a lot of people are up in arms how we're tariffing Canada and Mexico, and we shouldn't be tariffs them. But the thing is, nobody understands how much we're being tariffed by those countries.
Right.
Milk was over 200% tariff.
Yes.
On milk coming from Canada to the U.S.
Yes.
Maple syrup. Metals. Fuel. Electricity even.
Yeah. The tariffs coming out of Canada were absolutely ridiculous.
Same with Mexico going into the U.S.
Yeah. And, without the United States and was it $1.6 trillion in military spending every year?
Mm-hmm.
Without that, neither of those countries would even exist.
Mm-mm.
They would have been taken over long ago.
Yeah. And not only that, but our country is so abundant around the 50s, 60s, and 80s that we knew we were going to be pulling things from other countries because it was cheaper to buy it in other countries and pay the tariffs than it was to produce it here.
Well, the United States actually lived off of tariffs for a very long time. Very long time.
Right.
And we started losing the tariffs around, I think it was shortly after the Civil War. We started cutting back on tariffs.
Actually, I believe it was World War One.
Was it?
It may have been before World War One, but it started increasing after World War One.
Okay.
Because all these other countries now needed American goods, and they had none of theirs to produce, and also land lease. So, in order to help pay back land lease, I think that's when the tariffs started ceasing or changing. And that's also when we started our income tax.
Right. Because the American government wasn't making enough money on tariffs anymore.
Right, because there was nothing to get from the other countries.
Right.
Or they weren't willing to pay for our goods with
They
tariffs.
owed us so much.
They owed us so much.
Yeah. Because we financed both world wars.
Right. And
even before we were involved in them.
Right. And that's what we're doing with Ukraine. So looking for third world war.
Yeah.
But the tariffs, they all started really getting really bad at NAFTA.
Well, NAFTA was a raw deal for the United States.
It was. But yet our leaders agreed to it, and it kind of shot the American people in the butt.
It did.
Helped out Canada and Mexico.
Not only that, it helped out a lot of companies in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Ford and Chevrolet started sending all their jobs out of the country.
Yeah, Canada and Mexico.
Yeah.
So, you know, how that made it harder for the American people to survive.
Yeah.
And the leaders, yeah, they got probably a kickback.
And it's not just Ford and Chevrolet. I mean, Dow Corning,
Yeah.
Rubbermaid.
Well, you even look at this is the thing that's kind of crazy is California is sending their avocados to Mexico. Mexico's sending their avocados to California and the rest of the states.
Right.
And we're sending our corn that we produce here to Mexico, and they're shipping us their corn.
Right.
And we're paying more for it
Yeah.
than we are producing it here and selling it here.
I don't. I'm
Um,
not saying it makes sense.
it doesn't.
No.
It's all for, you know, making people happy.
Yeah.
And it's not the American people that are being happy. And so Canadians are all up in arms with this, but yet they
What is
don't
it?
import.
30% of the crops made in the United States go into warehouses
Yeah,
and sit there until they rot.
and Canada, that we don't import a whole lot. We do import some goods from
We do.
Canada.
I mean, there's one particular city in Washington State that is on a little peninsula that
Yeah.
the only way that you can get to that city, which is in the United States, is through Canada, and they get their power from Canada, and they get their fuel from Canada. I mean,
Yeah,
they're screwed.
yeah, because they have to be ferried to that peninsula.
Yeah.
But the U.S. government or Trump has talked about finding ways of getting them power and
Yeah.
all that stuff from the American companies,
Right.
which, you
So
know,
you knew about them.
I did know about them.
They're really that particular city is the only one that it's not that big. It's not a really big city, but that's the only spot in the United States that's really being affected by the tariffs.
Right, and you know, they're increasing their tariffs even more, but it's going to affect the Canadian people even more. Same with Mexico,
Yeah.
and they know this.
Yeah.
And so they're agreeing to, I think, the terms, or they're changing their habits.
Canada since Trudeau left
Mm-hmm.
because he resigned. This new guy that took over.
Talk about this new guy. He's partial Canadian.
Right.
He's not even full. He is a citizen of Canada,
Right.
but he's also got citizenship in a couple other countries.
He does. And he didn't grow up in Canada.
Right. So how is he really Canadian?
And he wasn't elected.
Wasn't elected.
Yeah. But one good thing is he's actually talking with Trump.
He is.
You know, he might not be saying exactly what we want to hear, but there is open communication again.
Yeah. Whereas
Trudeau
Trudeau
was shut down.
Yeah. And I don't know how Canada, you know, they had an opportunity to get rid of Trudeau,
They did.
and they didn't. And I know there's a lot of Canadians that migrated to the U.S. and are trying to become U.S. citizens because of Trudeau. You look at a lot of the truckers.
Yeah. Well, Trudeau was very left.
Yes.
And it has hurt Canada.
Oh yeah. Well, you think about it. You got all your brightest and best leaving your country. It's a brain drain.
Yeah.
Because of a leader that wasn't looking out for the people. But what I was talking about with the world tariff war, you're starting to see other countries now seeing how the U.S. is doing their tariffs,
Yeah.
and they're looking at doing their own tariffs with their own neighboring countries.
Well, yeah.
Nigeria,
Nigeria, for example.
Yeah. And I was talking about Russia with China with Canada.
Yeah.
And you could even see China and Russia.
Yeah. Yeah, they've been in a tariff war for a long time.
Right.
It ramped up.
It ramped up.
Yeah.
And what you're starting to see with this tariff war is a shift, because the country's starting to see that America has no clothes, and what I mean by that is the American people no longer have the power now. It's starting to shift to the American people having power,
Right.
because I think a lot of your foreign leaders were looking at our leaders as the ones to deal with and not the people.
Yeah.
Now I think they're looking at maybe we have to deal with the people.
Well, see, that's a nightmare for them.
That is a nightmare for them.
And it's a nightmare for NATO, it's a nightmare for the United Nations.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll tell you what, if the people have the control, the United Nations might be kicked out of New York.
Well, NATO shouldn't. We need to. I think that the first opportunity that Trump can to get out of NATO, he should.
Yeah, he's kicked that around. I don't know that he's really committed to it.
I think we need to voice up on that, because if you look at the biggest reason why I say that is you look at NATO. NATO isn't being led by their people; they're being led by their oligarchs,
right?
And their leaders, and their leaders aren't looking out for their people; they're looking out at their bank accounts and their pockets.
They're unelected bureaucrats.
Yes.
Yes, it's the same people that we're trying to remove from our government.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think if we were to get out of NATO, because we spend so much of our GDP in NATO,
mm-hmm.
and NATO countries aren't even investing in their own countries for their own defense.
Right. Yeah. What was it? I think it's 67% or something like that of the entire NATO budget is produced by or is given by the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nobody else even comes close.
And that's yours and mine and your guys' as taxpayers.
Yeah.
Tax money going to shit like that.
Yeah.
But that's all I really have left to say on that. I wanted to touch back on tariffs because I know we talked about it in the past.
Yeah.
But I figured it would be a good update.
It's actually things I wanted to add to it just a little bit. Things are turning around.
Yeah.
You know, I had said a while back when we talked about tariffs that it was going to hurt for a little while.
Yeah.
But there's already like Eli Whitney and Pfizer and Rubbermaid actually is reopening their plant in Indiana.
Right. There's a chip manufacturing plant being built in Arizona.
Right. There are companies from all over the world that are coming to America and opening manufacturing here because of the tariffs.
That's music to my ears.
Yes. There was a whole list of companies that were, and a lot of them were American companies that are coming home.
Yeah. Being made for Americans by Americans.
Yes.
Sounds like music.
Doesn't it?
All right, guys. So please leave a comment, like, share, subscribe. You got any more on that, Joe?
Nope.
All right.